Okay, so what you're about to see is the final installment of Bird Brought Me Here. I'm releasing it today because as of tomorrow, I will have officially been dead longer than I was alive. Enrollment in the Weapon X program, as well as a few other complications, conspired with Helene's Hellspawn twins, Fern and Gianna, in an attempt to disrupt this broadcast. But I've decided not to start over just because this one's a little banged up like I am. Anyway, the following is for entertainment and informational purposes only. I'm Orion, and this is Orion Spartan. Now, this is the part where you might expect me to say something like, "See how easy that was? All you gotta do is try really hard and you'll be okay." In the immortal words of Yoda,
Not so much.
I'm not gonna lie to you, it won't be easy. It's gonna take more than just thinking about it. It's going to be difficult, frustrating. Hell, your life is gonna flat out suck.
Who's gonna carry the boats?
But now that we've uncovered another layer of my personal anomaly, let's see if we can't finally figure out why a brain injury so severe had to be measured using sound frequency presented itself more or less asymptomatically for nearly 20 years. Let's not rush to the end of the story just yet. What we're dealing with here isn't your garden variety mistake. This was a sentinel event, the kind of grossly negligent malpractice that doesn't just raise eyebrows, it blows the doors off. A systematic failure so egregious, it borders on the unprecedented. Let's look at options. This happened in 2006. That gives you 2 years, until 2008, to identify the malpractice and take legal action. That's the window under Florida's statute of limitations. Even if you want to play the discovery card, Florida's statute of repose shuts the door in 2010. No matter what, it's absolute. After that, justice isn't delayed, it's legally dead. Yeah, discovery buys you a little time. A little. Clock doesn't start ticking until you knew or should have known. But that leash runs short. Best case scenario, you had until 2010 under the statute of repose. Now there's a narrow exception for cases involving a coma. Grants a little more time. But even that leniency ran out in 2013. After that, the law isn't just unsympathetic, it's immovable. So, the buck stops there? Well, if you could prove fraud, real deliberate concealment, then maybe, just maybe, you'd get the clock reset. But that's a high bar. I'm not talking about a clerical error or miscommunication. You need to show that they knew it, they hid it, and they did it with malintent. Without that, the statute stands like a brick wall. Right, like a deliberate cover-up. Now, if you could absolutely prove intentional, deliberate concealment on the level of coordinated criminal conspiracy, that's a different animal. That kind of deception doesn't just toll the statute, it rips them off the books. Make no mistake, you need airtight evidence, documents, witnesses, patterns, something that make the cover-up louder than the crimes. Without that, you're still looking down the barrel of a time-barred case. Cover up that big? Every dock, every facility, all in on it? That's not malpractice, that's a conspiracy. Prove it and you're not just chasing a claim, you're blowing the whole thing wide open. But you better have proof. Real proof. At the absolute outer limit, even with every legal exception stretched to its breaking point, you'd still be looking at 2015. That's it. After that, the courthouse doors aren't just closed, they're locked, bolted, and buried in precedent. In other words, SOL has a dual meaning here. But doesn't the fact that it was discovered in a different state change anything? Unfortunately, no. At this point, your only shot, your Hail Mary, is a ruling from the Supreme Court that strikes down the statute itself as insufficient or unconstitutional. Short of that, you're out of runway. Out of options, and the law's not bending the sentiment. So I'm SOL by the SOL. Let's take a look at how this even happened. Explanation 1. It wasn't that bad. This interpretation is flawed for a multitude of reasons. There was such a huge amount of blood loss to one side of the brain that there just wasn't enough left to keep even the basics running. So what happened to the side that didn't get enough blood? They got starved of oxygen, nutrients, everything. And when brain cells don't get what they need, they don't just wait around, they start dying. Fast. And I'm no Black Knight. It was more than just a scratch. Scenario 2. The one proposed by that admitting doctor who has since retired. That super rare backwards thing. Cross-aphasia. It's when the brain, in a kind of neurological Hail Mary, tries to reroute language through areas that handle completely different things. It's rare, like really rare, but it's basically the brain's way of saying, Plan A's out, let's see if Plan Z can talk. So, like using a hammer to turn a screw? It's like driving a nail with a screwdriver. Not impossible, but sure as hell not the way it's supposed to be done. Either or, but in your case, neither. In this case, we're talking congenital, as in you are wired like this from the start, which drops your odds from 4%. Since you didn't struggle to pick up language growing up, odds are you were born with that setup. The brain didn't adapt, it started that way. So 1 in a million? Still giving it too much credit. The odds of that actually being the case, so low no one's even bothered checking it. We're talking about something that make careers. Headline level neurology. But it's just that unlikely. That'd put you in a club with fewer than 10 people on the planet. Hell, only 20 cases ever reported. Total. Period. So yeah, finding 2 identical snowflakes? Better odds. Possible, yeah, but barely enough to register. So no one in the medical profession found this interesting enough to come up with something plausible? Unfortunately, no, it doesn't look that way. Another doc floated the idea of contra Q, the brain slamming into the opposite side of the skull from the impact, classic whiplash effect. Apologies, my Latin is a little rusty. That's the one where the brain rattles around the skull like a cue ball in a blender. Correct. That was first suggested by a fellow specialist in Florida, then eliminated upon discovery of the right occipital damage. Is the next one any more plausible? Again, unfortunately, no. The fourth theory, just about as far-fetched as the rest. What now? That I'm a Jedi and use the Force? Unfortunately, that's hoping for too much. Besides, we haven't developed sufficient technology for measuring midi-chlorians, if you remember that channel. The neuropsychologist theory that the affected spot is the minuscule, practically insignificant portion of the motor strip? Yeah, like we're supposed to believe the whole system crashed over a speck of real estate. The tiny sliver supposedly controls the entire opposite side of the body? Doesn't add up. Again, your engine blew because you ran out of gas? Where do they find these people? Waiting in line for scratch-offs thinking that's a retirement plan? If you look at the age of some of these people, you might be onto something. When dealing with the brain, it isn't uncommon to find abnormalities that don't exactly line up. So it isn't all that surprising. So, Magic the Gathering conventions? Okay, so everyone's been wrong and I'm not by the book. What's the scenario you've landed on? While still highly unlikely, the remaining possibility that has even a glimpse of verifiable legitimacy. And it's from a book, just not the kind you're thinking about. You're a superhero, or have superpowers, more accurately. That sounds like the brain damage talk. Unlikely? Sure, but not impossible. And before you roll your eyes, humans pulling off extraordinary things? That's not exactly unheard of. Now you gotta be careful here and not get sloppy with the copyright stuff. Homages are, for entertainment purposes only, too. It didn't take a toothy nuclear reactor to make Bruce Lee's recovery from a catastrophic back injury to come back and do Enter the Dragon. Or hell, look at your guy Jocko Willink and how he went from a punk rocker to a decorated Navy SEAL. To now, his most exalted achievement, sole sponsor of this show. Then there's Lance Armstrong. But he had a little, shall we say, help. So that's it? We're just going to nod along as nonsense takes the stand as the explanation? When you rule out the possible, all that's left. That's above my pay grade, and I don't punch the clock for fairy tales. You know that expression, hurt people, hurt people? How about hurt people, help people? I can still deliver the only message that anyone actually needs to hear. That it doesn't matter what happens, only what you do about it. Before you go, there was one possibility that we couldn't investigate nor eliminate. This is a simulation. Unfortunately, I have to dedicate this one to the tragic losses of my friends Singling and Billy Oliver. Their untimely departures had me at a loss. But instead of grieving and mourning their unceremonious demises, let's use it as fuel to better our lives and make them proud. They can't, so we must. In other words, time for some superhero shit.